What's up, everyone? Welcome to the first episode of the Hangover History Podcast. RJ here, joined by my co-host Mike. Mike, how you
Hey,
doing?
hey. Doing well, doing well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited because we've been talking about this for a little bit.
It's a fun
Uh,
one.
yeah, we're jumping into it. So basically, to give the people a little idea what this podcast is going to be, Mike and I are going to take some obscure history topics, stuff that,
Events, people,
yeah,
all sorts of stuff.
things that aren't really talked about too much or need to be talked about a little bit more. But we're gonna have some beverages with us too to get us through it.
And
It's
historically accurate or
yes,
geographically accurate beverages as well.
yeah, thematic. And I mean, our first topic today that we're gonna be kicking it off with is a deep cut, Mike. I
It
feel like
is.
not many people know about it,
It's one of
but
those things that it's kind of been mentioned throughout popular culture and the idea. So today's episode, we're talking about Japanese holdouts of World War II, and specifically one, Hiroo Onoda. But the
mhm.
idea of holdouts is relatively well known in Hollywood. You've seen it in movies and shows. The show Archer had an episode where they had that in it, and older shows too. Do you remember Gilligan's Island at all?
No, you had asked me if I had seen that.
Oh,
I've
it's
heard of
from
it. I
the
haven't seen it.
60s. And they have an episode where they do have a holdout who's apparently supposed to be Onada, but they just have a
Oh, like
Japanese
based
guy
off
play
them.
him. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think yeah, you were the first person who told me about it because I got into that through the Dan Carlin when he did Supernova in the
Mhm.
East. Those like 6 episodes. So I mean, yeah, if you guys are jumping in this podcast, we're definitely not historians, but
Definitely
I
not.
think that's the appeal.
Yeah.
We're attracting the regular people who want to learn a little bit more about history because we love talking about it. We both had history minors
Of
in
course.
college, so we like
Doing
it.
it so well now.
Yeah. Hey, listen, it's like that cliche saying, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, right?
Hmm.
You got to know it, especially nowadays, crazy world. But
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you what was crazy. The Japanese in World War II. So
It got a bit nutty.
today
So
I'm drinking Sapporo to represent
I
Japan.
I was unable to find Sapporo. I searched
That's all right.
4 different liquor stores in my local town, and I was stuck with Sinha. I don't know if you can see the label here.
No,
So
now I
it's
see it.
Chinese
Yeah.
beer. So paying our respects to people
The
who are heavily
Sino-Japanese
brutalized.
War,
Yeah, the
rape of
Sino-Japanese War,
Nanking,
all bad
all
stuff.
that stuff.
But a lot of that came from the mindset that a lot of Japan had at the time, where they had state Shinto, which Shinto is still one of the most prominent religions in Japan. Around 50% of Japanese still practice it. But state
Yep.
Shinto was this intense combination between that and the government. So that began in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. And that's when Japan started doing these crazy land grabs. They started fighting with Russia. They started beefing with China and starting to invade China, like you were talking about.
Yep.
But it led to a crazy mentality that a lot of these guys had.
Well, yeah, because I mean, we were talking about a little before, like it's like nationalism on a different level, which
Yeah.
I think is interesting about World War II, because if you look at Germany and Japan, they're both like really racially motivated.
Hmm.
Like both sides thought they were like the supreme
Which
beings
is
in
funny
their
on how they
area.
work together. It's interesting.
Right, I know. And they really, I mean, not to get too deep into World War II, but they really didn't associate too much with each other in
Hmm.
terms of how the war played out.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, they held some crazy views, some dramatic views. Because I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's always good to support your country and your beliefs and stuff like that. But when you start getting into that
When you
ultra
stay on an island
nationalism
for
thing,
30 years for your country, just
yes,
shooting farmers, it gets tough.
it's not great when you worship your emperor as a god. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's so interesting about Japanese culture is like it's so deeply rooted, and it's so like they held like ancient traditions up until this time period, and still
Mhm.
even today probably. But like you were saying, the Shinto religion, and then also the Bushido code, which you were talking
Yeah.
about, which is all like somewhat connected to the samurai, but it's
Yeah,
essentially like,
loosely.
yeah, the principles of like what those guys had, like duty, honor, justice, like pretty good things
Yeah.
out of context. But then when you take them to another level, it gets crazy.
especially when at that level you apply yourself as the dominant peoples and everyone else around you as subservient.
Yep.
That's when it definitely gets tough. And it's interesting you say that because the period that led up to state Shinto, which is known from like the late 1880s till the end of World War II when we said cut it out. Before that, it was the Shogun era, which was the
Yep.
last of like the samurai. And that when that fell, that's when it really started getting a bit nutty.
hmm Shogun, though, good show. You got to get on.
I gotta get
If anyone
ooh,
else
I
is
gotta
watching on this, you know what we're talking about. Um, but no, that is true. Yeah, they do have such a deep, rich history, and then it obviously gets muddied when the Christians come into play. They
yep,
like to they like to make things interesting
we do.
in history. But yeah, so I mean, let's get into it. So I mean, obviously at the time, brief lead up, Japan and China were in a bit of a mess there. Japan was kind of they
Just
saw themselves as the
murking them. Yeah,
main
they were totally
force.
winning. Yeah, they were
Yeah,
messing up China.
they wanted to dominate Asia pretty much. They weren't interested, I don't think, in a coalition of all the Asian countries as some others were. And yeah, because it does kind of compare itself to what Hitler was doing in Europe and invading Poland and
Hmm.
France and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So uh that's definitely where it starts. And we won't be talking too much about details of the war. That's like you said, you could do that on a whole other
Yeah, that's a
episode.
20-hour podcast.
But yeah, essentially, they invaded China. They committed a lot of war crimes. The rape of Nanking's probably the worst one that
Yeah,
people know about.
probably
I
the
think
worst
like
in the past.
300,000 people died,
That's
right?
like the low figure.
Yeah.
I've seen stuff that says close to 500. But yeah, that's probably one of the worst wartime atrocities and probably the past 300 to 400 years. Like truly, if you don't
Yeah.
know about it, take your time to look it up. It's really stuff that you can't even talk about. It's fucking awful.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, I was gonna say if you look at the Japanese soldiers and what they did, I feel like a lot of people, it's easy for them to write it off as like these are like robotic people who just were wanted to
mhm,
kill, which I think it's definitely more complicated than that. It
yeah,
always is. And I
absolutely.
think they're
There's heavy
so
indoctrination.
brainwashed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, indoctrination started at a very young age in the school system,
Mhm.
especially putting down other Asian countries on how they were lesser than you. It was very much prevalent. And that's what led to this mindset that caused people to refuse to give up. A
Right.
common, like, known aspect of the Japanese in World War II is the kamikaze pilots, very well known. And that's one of the perfect things with state Shinto, where you give your life for the religion. So it's not even like in their mind they were dying for Japan; they were doing it for the emperor, who
Yep.
was in fact to them a form of kami, which in Shinto is God or a deity. It's very
Mhm.
complicated. If you want to learn more about Shinto, find somewhere else. But
And he's complicated too, Hirohito, because there's a lot of differing
yeah,
views on his like role in World War II, it seems.
definitely, because he stuck with it after, and he worked
Yeah.
with the occupying forces to de-radicalize the country.
Which kind of led credence to the idea that maybe the military officers like kind
Mhm.
of took control during that time.
Yeah, like a lot of stuff, like a lot of these empires where it starts getting nationalistic and crazy, it's heavily
Yep.
tied in with the military. So it's usually a sense of military nationalism and just pride.
Yeah, you look at even like the Romans, like Caesar and his military basically tried to take over the
Yeah,
republic and stuff. Yeah, it goes back. Um, so I guess we can get into Hero Onoda because he is. I mean, yeah, when you look it up, he's probably the main holdout, the one that people know the most. Though
yeah,
it wasn't an
definitely.
isolated incident.
So what separated him from all other holdouts, because there was a lot of them, not only was he one of the longest, he kept operating like he was fighting an occupying force. So he went to a school, what was it? The
Mhm.
Nakano School in Japan, which was a specialized commando school essentially, where they taught him everything from foreign languages, code breaking, infiltrating, handling explosives, and a bunch of other guerrilla tactics.
Mm.
So he was by far out of all the other holdouts the most well trained. I guess if you wanted a comparison, he's kind of like a modern day Green Beret type.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Just like specialized in every single facet.
Yeah, and there are
Which
other holdouts too. In the Battle of Iwo Jima, there were holdouts till like 1949 who were just in
Yeah.
caves hiding and scavenging food and water. But Onada's definitely a unique story. He was born to a wealthy family in Japan in 1922. He
Mhm.
was well educated, and in 1939, he went to go work for the Tajima Yoko Trading Company in Wuhan, China.
I'll
Interesting.
tell you, they create great stuff. One.
Really good stuff.
Yes.
But so he was in occupied China, and it's funny. I was reading about in his autobiography during this time. He was talking about how he picked up a bunch of bad habits. He fell away from Shinto. He was smoking 50 cigarettes a day and playing
Nice.
mahjong all night long.
What
So
is
in 19
mahjong?
mahjong's it's a like a Chinese game that you often gamble on. I don't really know how you play
Oh,
it.
okay.
But in 1942, he gets conscripted into the Japanese army. And because he has this specialized education, they decide to go on and send him through to the Nakano School, where he's trained for, I want to say, over a year. It's tough to find a real
Yeah.
length for how long he was there, but it was far longer than your average conscript
I
would
mean,
get.
to learn all that stuff, you have to. It's going to be an
Yeah.
intense situation.
Yeah, no, yeah. It was very specialized. And
And
he
the war
finally
had already started, right?
Oh
In
yeah, yeah. This is
39. Yeah.
1942.
Yeah.
39, World War II started, but Japan had pretty much been fighting since the 20s.
Yeah.
A
Right.
constant just war of aggression against surrounding nations. So eventually he gets assigned to the island of Lubang in the Philippines. Now,
Hmm.
Lubane's around 45 square miles. It's mountainous, heavily jungled, nasty snakes, all sorts of bad shit there.
Yep.
And he was sent there with around 80 other Japanese to go secure the island in case of, and don't let the Allies invade it. And if they do invade it, act as a guerrilla force and
Hmm.
continue to pester them. So eventually, the Allies actually start to invade. And this is when all of a sudden his commander, let me find his name.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting story. Well, I think while you're looking that up too, how you were saying kind of his upbringing, we had talked about the fact that his mom, before he left for the war, gifted him a knife
Oh, yeah.
and said, use this to kill yourself if you're captured
Yep.
or any, yeah,
And that
which,
just goes further into the indoctrination where your
right.
own mom would send you off with that.
Well,
So,
it's back to the Japanese too, the seppuku.
oh, yeah,
I think
seppuku.
that's how you,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well known. And
Which if you watch in Shogun, like people are killing themselves left and
I
right. It's
mean,
pretty
even
insane.
today, Japan does have wildly scary suicide statistics for like
Right.
younger people. It's
Don't is that where that suicide forest is too?
Yep,
Is that in
yeah, where
Japan?
Logan
Yeah,
Paul
yeah,
went
yeah.
in and filmed
Yep.
around.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, that was bad. But so in
That was a
February
boxer.
1945, the Americans land at Lubang, and Onoda
Mhm.
immediately wanted to move into the jungle and start doing guerrilla warfare, doing little operations, hit and run campaigns. But two of his outranking officers stopped him, saying that that's a very dishonorable fight style, and that they should
Yep.
face the enemy head on. This did not sit
Respectable.
well with Onada, so he stuck back for a bit, and eventually people are leaving the island.
Yeah.
Major Yoshimi Taniguchi was pretty much the last man off the island and told Onada and around four others, "Stay here, do not kill yourself." Let me find the exact quote he said.
And it's crazy because if they're given an order, they're upholding that order,
Oh
as
yeah,
we'll see
no, it's
later when we talk about when they finally find him after all those years too.
it's
Um,
totally terrifying. This is what he said. Uh, nope. But he pretty much, I mean, he had to give the order to all the men on the island, don't kill yourself
yep.
unless the enemy's like on top of you. You need to die fighting. Just totally crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, how many? I mean, there were probably countless islands that Japan was
Yeah, this
fighting
was in the
on.
Philippines, so there was a
Yeah.
whole lot of islands around.
Which makes sense as why, these isolated islands, all these soldiers, it's hard to get, even in that time, communication across to let them know about this stuff. So it makes sense why there were so many holdouts, to be honest.
And this, here's exactly what his commander said. You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we'll come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are continued to lead him. You may have to live on coconuts. If that's the case, live on coconuts. Under no
Jeez.
circumstances are you to give up your life voluntarily. So
Well, he did that.
he did live on lots of coconuts. So
Yes.
then he's left on the island with Corporal Shiochi Shimada, age 30, Private Kenichi Kozuka, age 24, Private Yuchi Akutsa, age 22, and then it's Hiroo Onoda, who at the time's 23 years old. So
And he was kind of the leader of that pack, right?
yeah, he was the highest ranking, even
Yep.
though I think one of the corporals was older than him, and he was
Okay.
by far the best trained. None of the others were Nakano trained or went to the commando school that he did.
Yeah. So
So
because he had a little bit of a crew with him even deep into after the war as well, right?
yeah,
Yeah. He,
slowly guys got picked off. His
yeah.
last fellow soldier died in 1972, which
That's
is
insane.
yeah.
Insane.
So in August 1945, and also when they leave, he gets right to work. He starts harassing farmers. He's known as what you would call today a force multiplier, just a small unit of people who make a large unit's life
Yep.
more difficult. So he immediately started raiding farms, burning rice fields, killing cattle, just trying to mess up what he thought were supporters of the American occupation, because at the time,
Mhm.
America's landed on the island.
Yep.
So in August 1945, this was like 6 days after we dropped the nukes. He found a leaflet saying that the war is over, come home. He thought that it was fake immediately
Propaganda.
because he was
Yeah.
like, why else would they shoot at me when I shoot at them? That was his
Right.
original logic. Why are they shooting at me if the war is over?
Not.
Because
Yeah.
you shot at them first.
Yeah.
So for years, there's leaflets being dropped. Their family members are dropping stuff.
Mhm.
In fact, commanding officers in the Japanese army were like not writing. This is actually why they messed up. They were using translators, telling them how the war's over,
So there
commanding
were
them to end.
mistakes.
And in one of these, yeah, there was a grammatical error. And Hero, who's heavily trained, immediately assumes that this is espionage and that he's being psyoped. So he just totally goes off. And that was the point where he immediately stopped believing anything.
And I mean, it sounds insane to us because we grew up in such a different society. But if you're like trained through the military, went to the school like he did,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of understand, his paranoid sense,
And
like,
also, he would refuse to believe that Japan would surrender. I mean,
right.
he would
Well,
be,
yeah, that too. Yeah.
but yeah, no. So they just continually just lived off of boiled coconuts, different fruits,
Some bananas.
bananas, lots of boiled bananas as well. And then it was in 1949, one of the soldiers, Private Yuichi Akutsa, who I read some of Hiro's actual autobiography.
Yeah.
Hiroo Akutsa was the only one in the group who was from a city, so he was really not used to the rural elements. Hero kind of just called him a pussy. Like he didn't think he would be
Yeah.
able to make it. He thought
Yeah.
that he was very weak and that he would leave the group behind. So from the start, he wouldn't tell him where he was hiding the ammo because he knew that he would surrender. So in September 1949, uh, Yuichi Akutsa gets into an argument with the group and he just runs away, runs off on
Yeah.
his own to go surrender. It took him 6 months to find Filipino forces to surrender to. So he was alone for 6 months.
Yep.
Yeah, before he could even surrender. So during this time, they have no medicine too. Onoda's been left with a garrison with around 1,000 rounds of ammunition. They all have rifles. There's around 20 grenades, very small amount of rice. So from the start, they're scavenging. There's no medicine that they're left with, no bandages,
Right.
nothing. It's
Which is
absolutely
probably more insane than the fact that he just was
yeah.
fighting for 30 years, was the fact that
No, yeah, he
they
survived.
weren't getting replenished on ammo.
Mhm.
Like, it's insane. Yeah.
He did say the one saving grace, there was a plentiful supply of water on the island through streams and rivers.
Yeah.
So he was always boiling water. So he never really risked dehydration, but no, it's absolutely nuts. Literally, truly a feat of survival and just
Yeah.
stubbornness. I think I have some of what they would usually eat written down.
Well, yeah, you had this quote here where they were talking about he survived on boiled bananas and coconuts, and he would occasionally pilfer rice and salt from the nearby village.
And even more of a dick move. So during the World War II, the Philippines were totally brutalized by Japan, much like
Yeah.
China and other countries in the region. So imagine you're just a farmer on this island. Oh, the war's finally over. Thank God. 2 months later, someone's shooting at your cows. Someone killed your
Yeah.
uncle. There a bunch of crazy Japanese guys in the woods causing a muck. I think he killed around 3 cows a year.
That's
So
insane.
killed like 90 cows during his time.
Yeah. That's a lot
That's
of meat. Yeah.
it is. And honestly, yeah, he was totally messing up the local economy. He kind of created it so everyone would just carry guns around now on this island.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it was people were just in a constant fear that they could be attacked. No, it
And
was
I mean, we were
totally
saying before though, like, so what was his final kill count? It's not known for sure, right?
yeah. It's in the 30s is what a popular statistic is for Filipino civilians and police that he killed. But even then,
Yeah.
it's hard to find the separate incidents of the shooting because in his autobiography, he does not mention any of that.
No. Well, I
Yeah, he
mean, it
just
could have been worse.
yeah,
He could have,
definitely.
you know what I'm saying? A heavily trained guy like that, like it could have been a lot worse.
It
So,
did get tough though. I'm pretty sure there was a rumor that he may have beheaded someone.
oh yeah, you said that. That's
Yeah,
not great. That's
yeah,
not
no,
great.
not great.
Well,
So,
there was that crazy story about I think this was before World War II started. Dan Carlin was talking about with the Japanese soldier that beheaded that Australian soldier, and like they got a picture of it that they put out to the Western civilization saw it in the papers and stuff, and it was he like wanted that picture. This Japanese soldier like wanted to see the picture of him beheading
yeah,
this dude.
no, the
It's crazy.
brutalization is and just the mindset that Imperial Japan had at the time. It's really difficult
I
to get
mean, if I
apology.
I feel if I had to choose at that time to go up against a Nazi soldier or a Japanese soldier, I think I'd much rather go up against a German. I
Yeah.
feel like
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
because
yeah.
you're gonna be I would be more scared of the guy that doesn't
So
care
I
about
saw a
dying.
statistic: 4% of American German POWs by the Nazis were killed by the Nazis, just executed. In Japan, it was 27%
That's
of
crazy.
POWs died.
Well, honestly, you know what I think the difference is like they were both very indoctrinated, no doubt. But I feel
Mhm.
like the Nazis were indoctrinated to Hitler
Yeah, they were
versus
into National Socialism, which was a newer
yeah.
concept that had
But the
been created.
Japanese, it was so deeply rooted. It wasn't even about a
Yeah,
person. It was about a culture and
and it
about
had
a
always
belief
been a
system.
warrior-based culture
Yeah.
as an island constantly defending itself. No,
Right.
definitely. So for years, these guys are just living in the woods. It's till 1953. They're out trying to raid some fishing nets to steal some fucking poor farmers' fish.
Yep.
Where I think it was Shinada. Let me see. Yeah, Corporal Shimada was shot in the leg during a shootout with fishermen, and with no medicine at all, no bandages, Onada was able to nurse him back to health. But I think he mainly used coconut leaves and stuff like that
Yep.
as a bandage, but it's really insane that he avoided infection. Meanwhile, he ended up
Yeah.
dying a year later in another shootout with Filipino police. So Shimada's gone in 1954, and Akatsu was gone in 1949. So now it's just two of them.
Yep.
It's Private Hiroshio Kozuka and now just Onada. That's it. And he was in luck because apparently Kazuka grew up in a very rural area of Japan, and he actually knew a bit more about jungle survival than
Mm.
Hiro did. He
You
knew how
got
to
him in the
make
one category you didn't know.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
it's really insane. Like when you just the pure level of sheer determination, and also this is not an easy environment. Rainy season on the island
Yeah.
was from May to October, where it's just constant rains and floodings. So that's when they would try and hold out in these caves up in the mountains and stay
Mhm.
as dry as possible, and they would not really go out at all.
I think climate and disease wise, it's definitely not ideal. But I will
Oh,
say,
yeah.
like, in terms of like getting food and water, like you said, I feel like those tropical climates do benefit from that, like the coconuts and the
Yeah.
bananas, like
Well,
that
yeah,
definitely
yeah, it's not like
helped.
being stuck in the desert. Yeah.
But then
Plus,
the
it's close
disease
to farms.
aspect, how did they not get sick or any of
So,
that stuff?
yeah, they used to track their health by examining each other's stool and the hardness, and yeah, that's how they would genuinely track if they were getting sick.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was just gutting through it. They were sick multiple times.
Especially eating, like, killing their meat and cooking it and all
Yeah,
that stuff, like, not yeah.
and they would cook the cow, and they would get 3 days worth of cooked meat that they would have to eat within 3 days before it's spoiled, because
Yeah,
it's not like they have a freezer.
then they
And the
dry it,
rest of
right.
it they would dry, yeah. And they were able to dry around
Crazy.
250 pieces of meat per one cow. Each guy would eat one piece of meat per day. So it
Yeah.
really is nuts how just the pure survival standpoint, it's
Yep.
impressive. Could be a show.
No, seriously, yeah. No, it's
So yeah,
just the efficiency is crazy. Like, the fact that they could you throw any one of us out in the wild, we couldn't dry meat.
no, it'd be
You know,
bad.
it's insane. Yeah.
He often didn't have matches. Like he had one pack of matches that he just held
Right.
on to and would occasionally use. But yeah, they were making a lot of static fires just using wood.
Yep.
It's truly insane. And also another aspect I forgot to bring up. So Shimada dies in the shootout in 1954 with Filipino police. During this time, the Korean War is starting to kick off, and we have
Yep.
bases all over the Philippines. So he's just constantly seeing warplanes flying over. So he assumes like we're heading towards mainland Japan. He thinks that
Mhm.
the war is still in its heat and that these are people lying, trying to get him out of the jungle. So do you remember Akatsu, the guy who ran away first, who we thought was a
Yes.
pussy
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he's
yeah.
a good boy? So he went back to the island with Filipino police to try and show them where they were, but he wasn't able to get around it all because he was horrible at navigation. But he
Mhm.
was heard by Hiroo going through the jungle with a loudspeaker, followed by Filipino soldiers trying to get him
Yep.
out. So he was right that he would snitch on him.
But what year was that? Do we know? Because 'Cause
That
I'm
was
trying to
in
think, like,
so
how did they not
that was in the early 50s.
so the early 50 okay, so they did try to look for him a little before. Because it's
Yeah,
crazy that through all
there were
that
search
time, it
parties.
took so long to actually get him.
Yeah, and from 1945 on, there were leaflets being dropped constantly by Allied
Yeah,
planes. He just assumed that all of them were fake and lying to him.
right.
So it was beyond, even loudspeakers too from planes. Yeah, it was
Yeah, you don't
absolutely
know. He
insane.
was definitely paranoid, to say the least.
So in 1959, he's declared officially dead by Japan. They say that all the men on the island have perished.
Yep.
So then throughout the 60s, he's just going nuts, doing his thing. The Filipinos on the island are saying, yo, there's someone here. He's
Yep.
shooting people. Uh, yeah, there was a case of a decapitation in 62. Like he was
Jeez.
totally
Is that the one you were
terrorizing.
talking about that
Yeah,
supposedly?
he's
Okay.
totally terrorizing this island. Like absolutely. And it was just him and this one other guy. So they're and all the while surviving the elements. I think it was in this period he talked about in his autobiography. He woke up to a ant in his ear that had bit him, and it made him go deaf for a week. So
Jeez.
he just couldn't hear for a week.
Yeah.
There was another time where he was asleep and he got bit by one of the massive millipedes in the arm, and he couldn't feel his arm for around a month. So he just had a bum arm after getting bit by a millipede.
That's
Like the day,
insane.
yeah, I was
And
trying
then
to,
recovers. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. In the day to day of his life, it's constantly just maintenance on their campsites, which in the dry season, they wouldn't stay at the same spot for more than 3 nights in a row for fear that they would be found out. And in the
I'm
wet
just
season, that's when they would hunker down, try and find a cave or a mountainous area that has a bit of overhead.
yeah. Well,
But
that's the other thing because, I mean, it's such a wet climate. You need to have,
yeah,
like, shelter and some
they
I'm
made a
surprised
stove.
that they didn't, like it probably wouldn't have been a safe move if the villagers were armed, but, like, try to take their houses and stuff like
Oh, they
that.
were armed. The village, yeah,
Yeah,
but
right. So that's probably why they didn't do that.
so they occasionally would be able to raid like a schoolhouse. There was one part of the book I read
Yeah.
where they got a bunch of coffee, canned food, stuff that they thought that they would never see again. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were, I mean, it really was, yeah. Because a lot of the times at this point they were heavily armed and these guys were just folklore. Like it was literally a true boogeyman that you had running around the mountains.
Yeah, it's like the real life John Wick.
Seriously.
I
Yeah.
pulled up I was just pulling up this list. So they have a timeline of holdouts. And this one says supposedly in 2005
I saw that.
they found two
But then they
guys.
just disappeared into the jungle.
Yeah. And it's debated whether they were actually soldiers or not, but that's insane. They were
So,
they were in their 80s.
an interesting thing about that, Japan in the 1980s heavily tried to capitalize on this phenomenon
Yep.
in like vacation wise. They were like trying to get tourists in to go see this. I looked it up earlier. There's the Onoda Trail on
Yep.
Louvain where you could go like see where he lived and
Where he
stuff. Like,
was.
oh, it's totally nuts.
I mean, it really is like just objectively like an incredible
Yeah.
story in history.
And it's crazy that it wasn't uncommon. Like we were saying earlier, the thing that is so interesting about Hiroo Onoda was that he continued to fight the war. A lot of the guys
Yep.
just hit out. And a lot of
Yeah,
the
right.
other ones who hit out did it out of shame because they didn't
Yep.
want to be known to surrender. So it's very
Yeah, there was
very
that
interesting.
other holdout that I think they found after him that was kind of just
Yeah.
scared.
And
Yeah.
it sucked for him. He was a Taiwanese national. He was like
Yes.
conscripted. And after the war, they were like, you don't have like you don't have any rights in China anymore. It was totally awful.
Yeah, and he was
So,
the one that's I think he saw like an airfield with planes on it and
mhm.
assumed
Yeah,
like,
he was in
oh, we're still
Indonesia.
going.
Yeah. So he just hid.
I think his name's Teru Nakamura. Yeah, I believe that's him. Yeah, which is crazy because and then he came back and they like didn't give him money at first or anything, and then I think they eventually gave him some. But
So it was difficult for him because a lot of Japan recruited a lot of people from like Manchuria and
yep,
Taiwan to go fight for them. He didn't have any rights in Taiwan when he got back because by the time he got back in the 70s, it's full Mao swing.
yep,
Taiwan's totally in hot water. So I
mhm,
think he did end up going to Japan and living out
yeah.
his days there. But yeah, he got the shit end of the stick heavily.
It
And he
is
did
pretty
kill
bizarre.
enemies too.
It's insane when you think about it in the context that like while Onoda was in while he was still on that island, we had the Cold War, we had the
We were
Korean
in
War, we had
Vietnam.
Vietnam, all of
Yeah,
this
he
stuff
left in the
happened.
heat of Vietnam.
Yeah, it's
At the
crazy.
yeah, no, it's totally
Like
insane.
imagine coming out of that and learning about all these other things. Like the world is completely changed.
Yeah, no, and that
Yeah.
apparently that was a huge culture shock. So throughout the 60s, he's just going on looting shit, just terrorizing the island, literally making life a living hell for every inhabitant. In 1972, his buddy Kazuka is killed by Philippines forces, like the actual army. So they
Oh, okay.
accidentally stumbled upon the Philippines army doing a training exercise on the island. They had no clue that those guys were still out there. They just thought it was like crazy
Myth.
fairy tales. Yeah, myth.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they're engaged by two guys in World War II era Japanese uniforms with bolt action rifles, and they were like, okay, they're clearly still survivors on the island. So they reissue the search. And that's when the guy who finds him becomes involved. Did you read at all about this guy?
Is this the dude that was like he wanted to look for like some random things? He was kind of like a rebel.
Yep.
Is this who you're talking about? Yeah. He like dropped out of school and he just had this mission to find Onoda.
That's it.
Yes. What was this guy's name? I forget his name.
Enorio Suzuki.
Yes,
So
yes.
he was a college dropout. He was born in like 1949. So when he was born, they had been on the island for 4 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy just to think about in period of time how fucking long they just
Yeah.
sucked it up there. So he dropped out of college in Tokyo. He was very disillusioned with what Japan was. He was confused trying to find its identity. So when he hears about the news that there are still World War II holdouts on the island, he's totally into it, and he's trying to become a bit of like an explorer. So in 1974, he declared his life to find Lieutenant Odana, a panda, and a yeti
Yes.
in that order.
Nice.
So this crazy college dropout, I think he's like 23, 24 at the time,
Mhm.
goes to Lubain. In 4 days, he finds him.
That's
He
the
found him
craziest
after
part.
4 days. Yeah. And at the when he finds him, Odina raises his rifle to him, threatens to kill him.
Mhm.
But apparently, in Odina's autobiography, he says that he noticed that the kid was clearly harmless. He was a hippie.
Yeah.
He kind of loves making fun of people for being soft. He has a very like, he's totally harmless.
Was he
So
by himself?
Yeah, at this point, he had been by himself for 2
So he
years.
found him by himself.
Yeah, he was by himself.
Yeah.
He was the last survivor. His one other
No,
buddy
but
died in
but
72.
the kid who found
Oh,
him
yeah, the
was
kid was
also
by
by
himself.
himself.
He was
That's
also
crazy.
solo.
Yeah.
So the kid's there. He's showing him photos of what Japan's like. He's trying to bring all this actual proof.
Yeah.
And Onoda just says, it doesn't matter. I need my commanding officer to be the one to relieve me. Taniguchi, the one who said, we'll be here in 3 years, 5
Yes.
years. So Inorio's like, okay, I can try and work with that. He flies back to Japan. He finds Taniguchi working in a bookstore
Yeah, he's selling books.
20
Yeah,
miles
yeah.
outside of Tokyo somewhere. So he gets him. And imagine what this guy's thinking, working at the store, like, wait, what?
Right.
These people, these psychos are still alive. But yeah, so that's pretty much how it ends. I think it's March 10th,
Well, do
1974.
they bring his family into the mix too when they get
His
him?
brother came.
Yeah.
His brother came, and on March 11th, he was pardoned by all crimes by the Filipino president. And that's actually the
Right.
image behind me. He's handing over
Yes.
his sword to him. But yeah, so he killed 30 people, completely pardoned. In Japan, he's known as a hero.
Yeah.
Like, he's totally hailed. He's a celebrity. Like, he talks about how paparazzi's constantly following him. He
Mhm.
can't move anywhere without a camera being shoved in his face.
Yeah. And he wrote a book too, right?
He did. And that's the one that
Yeah.
I was kind of picking through reading.
I know, I'm
didn't read-
kind of interested about reading that now.
He definitely paints himself in a much more noble light. Like I mentioned, he doesn't bring up any of the 30 people he killed.
Yeah, it's difficult because, like we were saying, like we understand his mental state, the indoctrination and all that. It's just like it's hard to obviously because he was killing innocent people, and he
Yeah.
had to have known like that these were farmers, right?
So his idea was that all those farmers were clearly collaborators with the Americans because it was an
Right.
occupied island. So
It's a
if they were
big
really,
conspiracy,
if
yeah.
they were truly honorable like him, they would be staging guerrilla ambushes. So
Yeah.
that was his logic to it. But yeah, you would have thought, right?
Right. Well, because you'd think at that point it's like this. You'd start to see some U.S. soldiers. You know what I'm saying? Especially if there are only two of them in the woods.
There was
you know.
crazy. So from the first part of the book, when they first landed, he talked about how he saw like an entire Marine division with 4 tanks in front of them, like rolling up the beach, and he was just like, "All right, I'm bailing to the
Yeah.
mountains. I'm going to be more effective doing this," even though his commanding
Yeah.
officers were like, "Fight them head on."
Well, it's like that the other holdout that we were just talking about who was from Taiwan,
Mhm.
who like I think he had a quote where he was talking about how he saw the planes on the airfield and he's
Yeah.
like, that one mistake cost me 30 years of my life. And I'm like,
And later on, Hiroo also just started getting intense regret. There was a part in his book where he was talking about he was in Tokyo looking out at the huge city that had developed so much. Like,
yeah,
the state of Tokyo after World War II had been completely firebombed, flattened.
yeah,
So he's seen all this crazy technology, everything, and he was just completely disillusioned with what was it all for 30 years.
yeah.
So that's why in 1975, he and his brother just moved to Brazil. They say, fuck it, we're going to go to Brazil and herd cattle. And there was actually a good amount of state Shinto Japanese people who did that.
There.
A lot more traditionalists who just want to get away from the hyper technology, hyper capitalist Japan that had come in after the war.
Didn't the other side go over to South America too?
Yes, they did, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting. You got to think.
Yeah, it is. I wonder why.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There. Yeah.
But so in 1984, he actually moved back to Japan after he
Yeah.
read about a teenager who killed both of his parents for after not passing a college entrance exam. So
Okay.
that was his sign to move back, and he pretty much started. It was called the Onoda Shizenjuku,
Right.
which is the Onoda Nature School. So he
Mhm.
pretty much started Boy Scouts in Japan because he thought that people were way too hyperfixated on technology ahead of his time. But he was pretty much just trying to teach kids survival tactics, how to be one with nature, some of the basics of Shinto, just appreciating the environment.
I mean, if anyone's gonna do it, it's gotta be him starting the Boy Scouts of Japan.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
he
what
just
what
did
the,
that for the
what do you
rest of
think
his
about
life.
now though with technology? The fact that he was worried about it back then.
I mean, he lived till 2014.
I was just looking that up.
Yeah,
and
he
he
saw
was
the iPhone,
91.
dude. He
Yeah.
saw the iPhone.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's insane. again, like crazy that he lived to be 91, considering 30 years of his life were by himself, practically on an island.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
an interesting thing. So he went back to that island in like the 90s. There was some sort of ceremony. He
Okay.
gave $10,000 to a public school there. And
Sorry.
and there was obviously a bunch of people on the island were protesting the visit.
Yep.
Like we're owed retributions. Like family members of people who he had killed were there. It was
Mhm.
very interestingly received.
Yeah. So did he die in Japan? Do we know that?
Yeah, I believe it was in Japan. Yeah, he just passed
Yeah,
away
Tokyo. He
recently.
died in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think he
Yep.
had a heart attack.
That's crazy. Yeah. So just years of service, 1942 to 1974.
It was over
So
10,000 days.
and think about it. He fought longer than the World War II even went
Yeah,
on. Like just like
I mean, just he had the same pair of clothes. They wouldn't really. He refused to ever really wash them because didn't want to be caught nude. Like that was
yeah.
literally. So he would just wash the clothes while he's wearing them. They were totally tattered. But one of the most insane things, his rifle in
Mhm.
1974 is in pristine condition. He
Right.
cleaned it
Yeah.
multiple times a day. They made their own what was it? They made their own gun oil out of boiling down fruit and papayas and shit. It was
Yeah.
totally insane.
I mean, that school definitely helped him out, it seems, for that year or so that he was there. He learned just
Yeah.
about everything.
The school, Shimada having come from a farming background,
Yeah.
and also just the pure determination because there were plenty of guys who they just found like bodies in random pockets of Indonesia, Malaysia, all over.
I'm trying to see how many holdouts, if they have a number, how many in total there were.
I think
I
there
mean,
was,
I'm sure there were definitely people that they didn't find that
yeah,
probably
I think
died.
there were
And
thousands. I mean, I know in Iwo Jima, I got something here.
this
It's
says
like-
around 5,000 didn't surrender.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I tried
That's
to find
crazy.
pockets for that with Germany, which for the most part, when it was Nazis doing that, it was hardlined SS guys who were
Yeah.
very much ideologically into the Nazi party,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense because pretty much all of the Japanese military had that mindset of sheer determination, like even the
Well,
conscripts.
like we were saying before, it's like there will be like no Japanese people left. That's when we'll surrender.
Yeah,
Versus, Hitler killed himself, and then what else do you have there if you're a
yep,
Nazi? That was kind of all you were like betting on. And I
yeah,
feel like when your leader like kills himself and gives up in that way, like that's going to be pretty demoralizing for the people left too. I think, even if because I feel like most Nazis too were probably fringe, especially
mhm.
the soldiers. Like they kind of
A
were like,
lot of them really
yeah,
didn't. Yeah, the average Wehrmacht uh, German army conscript was probably less fanatical
yes,
than
yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
imperial Japanese
But
soldier.
like,
Also,
yeah, you're right. The SS people, the ones deep in
yeah,
that
the hardline
circle, are going to be
ideologically
crazy.
driven.
Yeah,
And even then, none of them. I mean, they got flattened out just because of where they were. It was in Romania, Lithuania, small random pockets.
yeah,
But the Japanese phenomenon was pretty huge. And in Iwo Jima, they kept on fighting. Like after I forget the name of the Marine Division, but eventually the 147th Infantry Regiment or the Ohio National Guard came into Iwo Jima. And they
mhm,
thought, okay, cool, just do security, make sure no one comes in. They didn't realize that there were hundreds of people hidden in the cave
yep,
system. So all of a sudden, a couple of weeks in, people are just getting shot at randomly. There are snipers who are killing people way after the war is over.
right,
Like years after, they're still trying to secure the island.
yeah.
Totally, though.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, so we got Onada. We talked about that other guy. I mean, those are probably the two main ones that I feel like you hear a lot. If you watch a podcast or a YouTube video, they're always talking about kind of those two.
Yeah.
But like we said, yeah, there were like 5,000. But I mean, going back to how we started at the beginning, like it's definitely insane to us. But I think when you look at the build up to World War II, how deep in Japanese culture went in their mindsets, like
Mhm.
it kind of makes sense that these these people would have sprung out of the war.
Yeah. And
It's
they
still
also had
wild though that
propaganda.
it took so long to find him. I
Yeah,
think that's the thing. And then the fact that this, out of all the people to find him, it was this
4 days.
20-year-old kid.
Yeah, 4 days of
Yeah.
just searching around.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally insane. But also, I mean, they had propaganda about the US that, we would torture them beyond belief, crazy stuff,
Right.
which we
Which
didn't
we didn't have a bad, we had a pretty bad history with Japanese prisoners, right?
Yeah, I back in college, I had to read a book about Eugene Sledge, who's one of the main characters in the show The Pacific on HBO.
Yes, yeah.
And in his autobiography, he definitely talks about, I think it was Paelu after they were digging into like POW's teeth, trying to get golden teeth out with a
Yes,
K-bar knife
I
while
did
they
see
were
that.
still alive, like crazy stuff. So I mean, it was war. Both
Right.
sides were committing brutal atrocities,
Mhm.
but it's interesting. Like at Battle of Okinawa, I think it was, local Okinawans were throwing their children off of a cliff because they didn't want the Americans to get to them. So
Right.
they had definitely not only propagandized Japan, but all of the settler colonies that they had established.
Yeah, and that's all the kind of the propaganda that Japan was putting out beforehand too, about how they kind of wanted to be a colonial power like
Mhm.
Britain and the US and all that. And really at the time before this war, I feel like the US, they weren't what they were today. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, no, we were coming off the Great Depression.
yeah,
Yeah, we totally weren't the global powerhouse that we were of today.
it is kind of crazy though at that time how big China is and how much control they had over it at that period and
Oh
how they
yeah,
were just
no,
like
they
dominating
decimated
them.
China.
Yeah.
I don't know when Mao really came into power, but
That would have been the 50s, right?
yeah, probably after the Civil War.
Because I think the invasion of Manchuria was like 1926, right? Because they had fought,
Yeah,
there was a
that's
war.
right.
Yeah, there was a war prior to that, right? The first Sino-Japanese War. So
Mhm.
the invasion of Manchuria was 1931 to 1932. And then I think the official war started for them in like 36, 37. Um, First Sino-Japanese War. Yeah, and the first Sino-Japanese War was 1894 to 1895.
Yeah, so they were just constantly,
Yeah.
yeah, they were just constantly, you know, aggressing,
Which makes
just
sense. I mean,
totally,
in history, it's always those neighboring nations it's gonna
yeah.
be a power struggle. And that
Mhm.
was the Republic of China at the time, right?
Yeah, that was not,
Yeah.
China became communist in like 1949.
And it was under Mao
Yeah, that was
that
under
that kind of
Mao, and
started.
yeah,
Yeah.
they pushed out the national forces.
Is that when, did you look it up? Is that when Chairman Mao came in, 49?
Yes, sir.
Oh. I mean, we could do a whole episode on him. He's
You really could.
yeah.
But I mean, it's just over 10,000 nights. He said in his book, not a single night. He didn't have a single full night's sleep. Just constantly sleep deprived.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well,
constantly
that's what I'm
rambling and
saying. Like
sick.
living to 91 with like all that sleep
Mhm.
deprivation and it's crazy.
Yeah, and he was still stubborn as hell after. He became
Yeah,
a
yeah.
farmer.
I know. I want to read that book now because I'm interested to see his perspective of how he
I
looks at
just
all
found
that.
random like overviews from
Excerpts.
JSTOR and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's probably an interesting read. I think they also recently made a movie about him that came
Oh yeah,
under a
you
lot
said
of
that. I
fire.
go look that up.
Well, so when he got back, he was regarded as a hero. Like he was totally in the popular culture. People loved him, which is kind of funny because they knew that he killed 30 people and they were still just totally glorifying this guy
Yeah.
as like the perfect example of traditional Japanese honor because he was a lost relic.
Yeah, it's called 10,000 Nights in the Jungle
Is that the one
is
from
the
like
name.
2021?
Yeah, it's 3 hours.
Yeah, so that movie got a lot of backlash.
It looks like it was a Japanese made film though. Yeah. I'm interesting. I'm gonna check what people were mad that he was kind of getting glorified.
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
yeah, people were upset that he was being regarded in this hero status.
Right.
Um, especially the people of the Philippines, obviously, but also a huge amount of Chinese people. I mean, pretty much anywhere in Asia that was brutalized by Japan was not
Mhm.
a fan of this guy being held as some sort of hero.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to call him a hero is definitely wrong, but I think uh like we've gone through, like you can understand his mindset at the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I definitely think he's kind of dumb. Not
no,
dumb,
I,
but
I
like
I think so too at a point.
because he was just brainwashed. Like you can't blame him.
Right. Well, obviously he had no probably track of time, but I
So
feel
he
like at
did.
some he
They
did.
would keep track of time through their food parcels. Yeah, he like slow at one point,
Yeah.
10 years in, he just looked at the one of the other guys and was like, "It's been 10
So
years."
I was gonna say at some point, like, how's this war still going on after 20 years? There's no way.
30
And
years.
he knew that Japan wasn't doing well
Mhm.
during the war. He kind of probably saw the
He got
writing on
there
the
late
wall,
war. Yeah.
which I guess makes sense in terms of him thinking that okay, the US is in control now of this island and stuff like that, but still, that's crazy. But again, I
Yeah, no,
guess
he
it's
was
like
nuts.
it's really hard for us to understand because like
Yeah, it's
we
hard to
were
sit
not brainwashed.
here
Yeah.
through this lens and just totally judge him where it's like, all right,
Yeah.
you need to understand through his perspective, but also his perspective can be wrong. It's
Yeah.
like the time old dancing around sensitive topics like this.
What do you think about him getting pardoned?
That's one of the weird ones for me because it was done by the president of the Philippines, right?
Right.
Like, so I think that I read something on how they were just trying to do that to as a sign of goodwill to Japan because they wanted to open up as
Yeah.
trade partners. Because at the time, Japan's economy is fucking booming. Like they're cranking
Yeah.
out VCRs, Sony, Mitsubishi, like they're just
Yeah.
totally hyper capitalized, right in it. Uh, they're they're doing cartoons and shit. Like he came out to a whole different world.
Well, it is crazy, like considering, like you said, the technology in Tokyo, like how quickly they bounce back from
Yeah.
what happened. I mean, two nukes dropped on them. Like you said, you had the fire bombings in Tokyo. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
really incredible to see like Japan now.
That
And they're
was
really
definitely
ahead of everyone in a lot of
yeah.
ways.
That was just part. Was that the Marshall Plan? Marshall Plan may have only been Europe, but yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
we had to do it everywhere. I mean, we just had to rebuild.
Yeah.
Just
And now Japan is like an ally of the
no, one of
US,
our
right?
closest. But that's
Yeah.
also because at the end of the war, like we were talking about at the start with state Shinto, I think
Yep.
it was MacArthur oversaw that area. He pretty much completely eliminated state Shinto, separated church from state.
Yep.
Emperor, I'm pretty sure, stayed in power. Didn't
Hirohito was in power
yeah,
until the 80s,
yeah.
I think.
So he
I
stayed
think
in power,
89
and
till he
they still
died.
have. Do they still have an emperor?
Let me look that up.
But yeah, they completely separated state
Yeah,
Shinto.
Emperor Hirohito was the longest running leader in their history. He reigned from 1926 until his death in 89.
Yeah,
Crazy.
no, it's fucking
I'm trying to
insane.
see like I doubt that they have an emperor now. Uh
Well, another
the
interesting.
leader of so they have a prime minister
Okay, so
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it ended there.
But I mean it definitely seemed like we kind of glossed over it earlier that the emperor figure in Japan was kind of like the queen in the royal family in England.
Even
Where
more. So
yeah,
he was tied into religion. So in Shinto, there's a concept called kami. It can be a god, a deity, an ancestor. It can be a part of nature.
yeah,
And the emperor was considered to be a direct line of kami that could communicate with people. It was so he was
interesting.
God. The emperor was God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why totally, totally fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if Japan because what would Japan's government be considered now?
Capitalist.
Yeah.
Might be a democratic republic, something of that nature. I mean, if they have prime minister, maybe parliament.
Yeah, right. So it couldn't have been. But I feel like their emperor was not like what you typically think of when you think of an emperor, that title of what
Yeah.
that means. Japan's government changed several times. After World War II, the country adopted a Western-style liberal democracy.
Oh yeah.
So there's the answer there, um, which makes sense now that obviously things have changed. Yeah, you kind of it's kind of like uprooting the source of what. It's kind of incredible that they were able to turn it around
Oh
because
yeah.
when something was so deeply rooted there,
Mhm.
um, I think you see it like in the Middle East and stuff and what's going on there. Like they're very deeply rooted
Well,
in
you
all
could look at
this.
it even with World War One to World War II Germany. World War
Yeah,
One, we didn't do a good job at de-radicalizing, and that's
right.
how,
Exactly.
yeah, it
Yeah,
picks up again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. But I
But
think they did a good job after World War II de-radicalizing the Nazis in Germany.
mhm. Well,
Which
you
I
can
don't.
even look into, like, what Saudi Arabia did after
Yep.
9/11 with their de-radicalization programs for, like,
Mhm.
radical Islam. It's really, really nuts.
Yeah, I forget who it was. I don't know if it was Churchill or someone else who kind of pushed for that um, in terms of Germany, like saying
Mhm.
that basically we have to root this out from the bottom or it's going to come back.
And that was tough too, because
Yeah,
then it just got separated right down the middle. We had our
right.
side, Russia had their side.
I know. Yeah. Then you got a whole complicated story there.
But yeah, I mean, Onada was interesting guy. Also about Suzuki, the guy who found
Yep.
him. He died in an avalanche in 1986 while searching for a Yeti.
Fuck, he didn't
So
find the Yeti?
no, he didn't. He died trying.
Damn.
But yeah, he died
Damn.
like
Did he
somewhere in
find
the
the panda though?
Himalayas. He did find the panda.
All right. That's a 2 out of 3. That's
Yeah,
not
it's
bad.
actually really not bad.
Yeah.
So Onada was a complete celebrity, and people wanted him to like run for office. He
Yeah.
never did. He refused to, but his wife
The
did.
wife, yes. She was like, she started like a far right group, right?
She started like an ultra
Yeah.
nationalist far right
Yeah.
party that wanted to bring back state Shinto.
Yeah.
So he did, yeah. That's another fun one too.
No, it really. I'm curious. I kind of like want to watch that movie now because it really is like just a way more insane version of Castaway.
Yeah,
He
no,
just like
I mean,
comes back. Yeah,
30
his
years
wife's
of
still there,
survival is totally insane.
and I think it was the other holdout we were talking about that he came back. His wife was with another dude
Mhm.
already. She was
Oh,
like, "All right, I'll divorce
yeah,
him,"
it's a
and he
hero.
was like,
Oh,
"Nah, you know what? Like, just keep
he
going
said,
there."
fuck it, you're fine.
Yeah,
He like
I've
got
been
an
gone.
apartment down the street. Oh
Yeah,
god, yeah, that's
I know
nightmare
that.
fuel.
Oh god, yeah. Imagine like what they had to deal with after the fact and everything. It seems like Onada, he
He
didn't
came
have
out as
any
a hero.
regrets. Yeah,
Yeah, he like, I mean, people love. He hated it though, being known as a
yeah,
hero. That's why he fucking moved. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, at least he got somewhat of a little redemption arc with his Boy Scouts for Japanese boys.
yeah. That's a good look. I think it was a good
Yeah,
move. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, man. I mean, crazy story. You got
30
anything
people
else on
killed,
this top?
millions in
Yeah.
damage.
What was the final? 30, around 30,
Around
we
30.
think.
Yeah, that's what
30
I'm
and
sticking
30.
with. Some of the
Yeah,
Islanders say upwards of 50, but
yeah.
definitely millions upon millions of dollars worth of damage, burning
Oh,
multiple
that
rice
too. Yeah,
fields,
right.
killing shitloads of cat. Like he killed 90
Yeah, we'll
cows. Once or
pardon
so.
him. It's all right.
Yeah, and then he got
Yeah,
pardoned. So
yeah.
that did not sit well with a lot of
Anything's
people.
possible, I guess. Yeah. But yeah,
Anything's
I mean,
possible.
crazy story. I'm trying to think of yeah, I'm excited now that we got this podcast running because
Oh yeah,
I mean, we could honestly stay on the World War II train for a little bit. I
yeah,
think there's a lot to do there. Yeah. I
definitely.
think it would be interesting to do some like profiles of all the different leaders in that time because I think what's interesting about World War II is like all the leaders. They
Hmm.
were so iconic, like for good or for worse, like Churchill. But you know who's interesting is De Gaulle. I've been reading about him a little, the
So yeah,
French
I know
guy.
like nothing about him.
Dude, he's kind of interesting. He would be a good guy to talk about, and I feel like a lot of people don't know about him. And he kind of led the French Revolution against the Nazis and stuff. So
Hmm.
that could be a good one. Figure it out. But yeah, man, you got anything else on this topic?
You know, really just think about how insane it is. 30 years.
Yeah,
I'm 24. I think you're 24 too.
it's the entirety of our lives, a little
Yeah.
bit more.
No,
Yeah,
genuinely like that level of commitment cannot be overshadowed
Yeah.
not even thinking about his own family. Even when he heard his brother's voice, he would assume, like, what, because at times they had his brother out there, like, yelling from a loudspeaker from a plane, and he immediately just assumed, oh,
Oh,
he's
they got
obviously
him.
being held hostage. They
Yeah.
got him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was in like the ultimate, just gaslit himself into oblivion.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely it's respectable, I guess, to some degree. That this guy
Yeah.
had this level of dedication and
Mhm.
perseverance. Obviously, the situation and circumstances not great,
Not great.
uh, but he's definitely an interesting guy to study, and I think he's pretty much summarizes the mindset of Japan at that time.
Yeah. Just
If you
pure
had to look at
tenacity.
one guy, it's probably him.
No, that's the fella.
Yeah,
I mean, it truly is absolutely insane, especially because, like I briefly mentioned, he was kind of a degenerate before he got in.
I was gonna say, yeah, I didn't know that aspect about him.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was totally having fun in China, just kind of away from, because on mainland Japan it was way more centralized with how you thought. And he just got back there. He started like doing push-ups every day. He started working out, getting ready to join the
I mean, that
military.
makes even more sense. Like he was probably wandering and
Yeah, he got into it.
he needed something to latch on to, and that
Hmm.
happened. It was just like the perfect storm, probably.
Yeah, no. So very cool guy. Well, not cool guy,
Yeah,
but interesting.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, man, insane story. I hope the people enjoyed learning about him.
Yeah,
If you didn't know about him, I think we broke it down pretty well. It's a lot. It's complicated, especially when
yeah.
you're
I was
dealing
about to
with the
say, I
context
just,
of that war. Um,
the amount of notes I had, I was like, oh my god,
yeah, but it's a
there's
good
so many
intro.
different
Hopefully,
dates,
people
different
will
names.
yeah, hopefully people will listen to this and then do their own little research,
Yeah,
I think that's always a good thing to do. But yeah, man, I'm pumped. I think we got this endless topics we can go into.
no,
And if anyone
definitely.
has ideas, let
Yeah,
us
just
know
comment.
and we'll talk about it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Definitely.
could be anything really, but I think our niche is definitely World War II.
Yeah,
Um,
World War II. Honestly, I like all Cold War stuff too. I'm
yeah,
pretty
Cold
much on
War
all
could be interesting to
1800s.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We can go
Definitely.
everywhere. Ancient Rome, Civil
Yeah, I
War.
mean, I do love the ancient stuff. I know you're more of like a modern history guy, like 20th century on. Would you
Mhm.
say that? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But I think like a guy like Caesar is interesting because I think it's interesting when you look at even in the ancients, like how much of that stuff parallels today. Like it
yeah,
really does repeat itself
oh,
in a
totally.
lot.
And it's
Yeah.
fun researching that, use my history minor a bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. We're putting it to
Yeah.
work finally. Yeah. All right. But yeah, any final comments?
No, no, it was good
Yeah,
being on my first full podcast
I
talking,
know.
so thank
Yeah,
you for
and this
bearing
is
with me.
yeah, and obviously we're roughing it out this first time around, but I feel
Yeah,
like
we're just
we'll get in the
spitballing. There
groove
was
of it
no
soon.
preparation. It was pretty
No,
much like, "All right, let's go."
we're doing it. And it was a heavy topic to start with, but
It was
yeah.
very, very loaded, but
Yeah, but hopefully the people enjoyed it. We'll see.
that's how you
But
make it
all
fun.
right. That'll do it
Alrighty.
for episode 1 of Hungover History. RJ, Mike will be back. Let us know what you want to see. Let us know what you thought. Peace out.
All
See ya.
right, thank you.